Stella Mae was born on July 6, 1910, in Payson, Utah, to John and Annie Lerwell. She was the seventh of 12 children. Her father was a farmer, and Stella remembers riding her little pony, Darky, around the farm herding cows. She was born into a time of great change in America. The country was at war. The first automobile was manufactured, and she remembers her father had the first Ford in their town in 1917. The presidents during her first decade were Taft and Wilson. Chaplin, Fairbanks, and Pickford were the Hollywood stars of the silent films. And although Stella was not dancing yet, the foxtrot and tango were the favorites of this ballroom decade. Stella entered her teenage years in the Roaring '20s. World War I was over and the country was ready to move forward. This was the jazz age. Her sister had one of the first radios Stella remembers. Her brothers were taking flying lessons, and she experienced her first airplane ride with them in 1928. She was scared to death. She and her girlfriends embraced the flapper fashion of the time, and Stella would finger wave everyone's hair, and they loved to dance. The Charleston was all the rage. Now the movies were talkies, and the stars were Valentino and Barrymore. Wings won the first Best Picture Oscar in 1927. The presidents were Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. At 19, Stella met the love of her life, Thomas Lee Beer. They dated for 2 years before marrying in 1931. In 1929, the stock market crashed and the country began a descent into a deep depression. Now, in the third decade of her life, Stella became a wife and mother. Times were hard, and it was a struggle to make a living in Utah after Stella and Lee had their first child, Bonita, in 1932. Lee hopped a freight train to California to find work in a sugar factory in Tracy, California, and sent for Stella and Bonnie to join him. From that time on, Stella would be a Californian. The little family grew to 4 when Leanne was born in 1935. 2 years later, the family went to Salt Lake to participate in a temple marriage. The 1930s were Hollywood's golden age, with such stars as Garbo, Davis, Gable, and great movies like Gone with the Wind and The Grapes of Wrath. The glamour era featured Fred and Ginger and dances to such songs as I Won't Dance, Cheek to Cheek, The Continental, and Top Hat. It was also a time when Latin dances became popular in the U.S. President Roosevelt gave fireside chats over the radio as he tried to reassure a struggling country. The 40s started out with Lee working at Safeway stores, and the family moved to San Jose. When they were expecting their third daughter, Pearl Harbor swept the country into World War II, and life changed yet again. Now they had war bonds, rationing, and loved ones in the armed forces. Lee went to work for the war effort at Hendy's and worked there as a machinist when it became Westinghouse for the next 30 years. Karen was born in 1942. In 1944, they bought a house in Willow Glen where Stella still resides today. Favorite singers were Sinatra, Crosby, and Dinah Shore, and the big stars were Cary Grant, Humphrey Bogart, Judy Garland, and Gary Cooper. The hit movies included Casablanca and Citizen Kane. And the dances. It was the swing era with the big bands of Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, and Tommy Dorsey. They danced to songs like Sing, 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 Little Brown Jug, and String of Pearls. President Roosevelt died in 1945, And the new president was Harry Truman, charged with ending World War II. Now the war was over, and it was the era of the family, and Stella was in her element as wife and mother. Her little girls were growing up in an era of TV, with Father Knows Best, I Love Lucy, and American Bandstand right in their living room. Drive-in movies and shopping malls sprung up as the new suburbs, and the family loved going to movies together as often as they could afford to. Favorites of the decade were Singin' in the Rain and American in Paris and other big musicals. Then along came Elvis and rock and roll, and times changed. It was Rock Around the Clock and Hound Dog on the radio now. As her girls grew up, Stella went to beauty college and got a career of her own. Bonnie, Leanne, and Karen were all married by the end of the decade, and Stella found herself the grandmother of 5 little ones. How she enjoyed taking care of them, and also caring for her widowed mother Annie, who now lived with them. The president was Eisenhower, and it was an era of growth and peace for the country.